Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We're going to be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Lamar.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Stand for a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lamar. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton. Mr. DeRay. Ms. Green. Mr. Howard. Mr. Lamar. Mr. Levenstein. Ms. Mineo.
Here.
Mr. Stridiron. Mr. Walker.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby recesses into executive session for the following purpose. Matter made confidential under FERPA, employment history of particular individuals, employment history of particular corporations, matters leading to the employment of particular individuals, the review of program and placements of students with disabilities, collective bargaining under the Taylor Law, NTA, and to obtain advice from legal counsel. I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. DeRay. Yes. Ms. Green. Yes. Mr. Howard. Yes. Mr. Lamar. Yes. Mr. Levenstein. Yes. Ms. Mineo.
Yes.
Ms. Burton.
Speak fast. Okay. All right. Hey, everybody. Okay. Tonight, I want to read a letter to you. Okay. I want to share a letter to you that was written by Christina Soon-Tornvat. She's a children's book author. She's a two-time Newbery Honor recipient. It was written by Alex London. He's a librarian. He's a journalist. He's a children's book author of more than 25 books for children. It was written by Ellen O., a children's book author who's also the co-founder of the We Need Diverse Books nonprofit organization. And it was written by me. Okay? My name is Phil Billner. I live right down Grand Street. Point in the right direction. Okay. I have issues with that. And I'm a former attorney. I'm a former New York City public school teacher. I'm taught middle school for 11 years. I'm also was an openly gay New York City public school teacher. And now I write books for a living. And like Alex London, I've written more than 25 books for young people. And the letter I'm about to share with you was submitted to the U.S. Congress. We submitted it to the U.S. Congress back in the spring. We submitted it to the U.S. House Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. And the letter was introduced into the record by Chairman Jamie Raskin. The book banning and pro-censorship movement is coming. Make no mistake, they may not be here right now, but they are coming. Okay? They are vocal, they are loud, they are ruthless, and they are relentless. They are well-funded, they are well-coordinated, but make no mistake, they are small-minded. Okay? They are small in number. So when they come to this community, and when they come for the students in this community, and when they come for the teachers in this community, and when they come for the librarians in this community, when they come for the school board members of this community, when they come for this community, it's going to be up to each and every one of you to stand up to these evildoers and fascists. Not only will it be your duty, it will be your moral obligation. Now I have to read this letter really, really fast. Okay. All right. We, the undersigned authors and illustrators of books for children and teens, condemn the efforts by organized groups to purge books from our nation's schools. Our concern is not for books themselves, but for the children, families, and communities who are caught in the crosshairs of these campaigns. The current wave of book suppression follows hard-won gains made by authors whose voices have long been underrepresented in publishing. Just 10 years ago, less than 7% of children's books featured characters who were Black, Indigenous, or people of color. Representation is finally increasing thanks to the work of groups like We Need Diverse Books. When books are removed or flagged as inappropriate, it sends the message that people in them are somehow inappropriate. It is a dehumanizing form of erasure. Every reader deserves to see themselves and their families positively represented in the books in their schools. These books are important for all children. Reading stories that reflect the diversity of our world builds empathy and respect for everyone's humanity. At a time when our country is experiencing an alarming rise of hate crimes, we should be searching for ways to increase empathy and compassion at every turn. A particularly insidious feature of the current attacks is the flood of accusations that anyone who seeks to give readers access to diverse books is a groomer, a radical, or a pedophile. These charges are abhorrent and without merit, and they have been leveled against not only authors, but against teachers and librarians. We strongly condemn this slander against our colleagues and our nation's educators. A book may not be for every student, but as we know from the many letters we receive from young readers, a single book can matter deeply to an individual student. Nearly all campuses have an existing system to handle a parent's concern when their own child's reading material. Pro-censorship groups seek to overwhelm these systems by pressuring schools to pull entire lists of books from shelves for review. Some extremists have intimidated authors, educators, and school board members online, even threatening them with violence. Okay? This has created an atmosphere of fear that has led to soft censorship in many districts. Books are quietly being removed or never purchased at all. Authors are never invited to speak for fear of drawing the wrath of these groups. I have 2 paragraphs left. Librarians are bastions of the First Amendment. They provide equal access to a wealth of knowledge and ideas for all public school students. When individuals and organizations seek to advance their own political agendas or personal beliefs by censoring books, they infringe upon students' constitutional rights. We call upon Congress, state houses, and school boards to reject political manipulation of our schools, to uphold the values of freedom and equality in the Constitution, and to protect the rights of all young people to access the books they need and deserve. I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to address the board on agenda or non-agenda items? Thank you. We're going to continue. We're going to go to our substitute superintendent today, Mr. Forget.
Thank you, Madam President. This evening, we have 3 items for consent, items 3.1 through 3.3.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Yes, sir.
1, 2, and 3.
Oh, so we'll just do them all separately. Okay. So let's start with item 3.1. I'd like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. Questions or discussion on item 1? Yes, sir.
We still have 2 schools for CSI status?
Yes, sir.
And
Yes, sir.
Put your mic on, please.
there we go. And is it 2 or 3 schools right now that are TSI?
3 TSI.
And will the board have any ability to review the SEPs by those schools? And can that happen? And if so, when?
Yes. We're doing the CSIs this evening, and the first meeting in September will bring the TSIs. We still have 1 school that's finishing up, so we'll bring all the TSIs at one time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Board members, any other questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Green? Yes. Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein? Yes. Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton? Yes. Mr. Doré?
Yes.
Let's move on to item 3.2, please. I'd like to entertain a motion. Questions or discussion? Yes, Mr. Lamar.
There's a section in here that asks the district to identify how the subgroup perspectives have been incorporated, but what are the identified subgroups? That section is blank.
Which page are you on, Mr. Lamar?
Oh, goodness, hang on. I made notes. Let me go back.
Extended subgroups.
It's subgroup perspectives.
Is it in the beginning?
I think so. Let me get back there.
Page number.
I'm on the wrong page. Where'd it go? I should have printed this out.
Mr. Lamar, are you referring to page 21, districts with TSI schools only, stakeholder group? And then on page 21, it refers to identify how the perspective of stakeholders associated with the identified groups. We have more than TSI. We don't complete that. We have CSI and TSI. That doesn't get completed for the district.
Okay, Mr. Lamar?
Yeah, on that. Also, it says that the district priorities are being measured. But, again, this has come up many times. Currently, 50% of our 8th graders are failing in reading. Shouldn't the comprehensive improvement plan somewhere have reading levels listed as part of the measurement?
So just because it's not in this plan doesn't mean that the district isn't focusing on this. The district comprehensive improvement plan is an opportunity for a group of stakeholders to come together to identify what's working, what's not working, taking a look at some of what's happening in all the TSIs and CSI schools and figure out certain things we can commit to as a collective team. So as a team, it wasn't one person that selected it. We identified student engagement as a critical area that we really need to focus on district-wide, specifically targeting our TSIs and CSIs for support, communication, making sure that voices are heard in reciprocal communication, not just from top down, but bottom up and across and sideways and every other way. And then the final thing is climate and culture. The climate and culture focus this year is going to be strictly at South Middle School, where central office and supervisors and directors will be embedded into the work that's going to occur over the school year. So those are the three pieces to focus through our district comprehensive improvement plan. However, the work of the curriculum and instruction team is to improve literacy across the district with the support of the other divisions. So those are core things that should be happening. These are targeted interventions for the highest need schools that the group of teachers and administrators came up with.
Mr. Levinstein?
Mr. Forget, are half of our students failing in reading?
I think that there are a variety of different measures that we use. When you take a look at the iReady data that we presented, when you look at we just got the state assessment results back, and they are scale scored. They're not leveled yet into 1, 2, 3, or 4. We're still in the process of looking at that. Are our students performing lower than expected? Absolutely. Is the district not required? Any educator should be focusing on literacy right now, specifically in our school district. We've got to figure out the variety of different ways that students learn to read. We have the ARC program, and we're seeing success with ARC. We had an amazing presentation from Mrs. Moriarty that shared with you the impact that ARC is starting to have. It takes 3 to 5 years for an intervention to take hold. We're starting to see progress already. And then individual schools are doing unique interventions to address the unique needs of the students that are in there, fill in the gaps that maybe ARC doesn't have. We're seeing growth with that. But your direct question to me, are the students really struggling in literacy in this district? I don't want to give you a percentage. Absolutely. And we're focusing on it. Mrs. Moriarty, you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Forget. I think it's not a pass or fail. It's about, are you reading on grade level? And if you're not, how many grade levels below are you reading? And so what we look for is the growth, the demonstrable growth. If a student grows a year in a reading level from one grade to another, that's tremendous. And so what our really intentional focus, and we've discussed it before, is focusing on the early levels and getting them to be the strongest readers that they can be as we continue to watch them grow across the grades. But we do have a deficit in the middle school and the high school that we need to continue to focus on as well.
I understand. I was just replying to the comment that half of our students failed. And I understand there's a lot more to it than that simple answer. And I didn't even know we had a reading class that someone could fail. But yes, you could be below your grade level. Thank you.
Board members, any other questions on this item? Yes.
I should have said below grade level.
Another question?
No.
Anybody else? Okay. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard? Yes. Mr. Lamar? No. Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker? Yes. Ms. Burton? Yes. Mr. Duray? Yes. Ms. Green?
Yes.
Let's move on to item 3.3. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on this item? Yes, Mr. Lamar?
There's a section called
Pardon me, sir, can you turn your mic on? Thank you.
in the section called accountability, it says that the representatives on the team from the NTA will be chosen by the team leaders that are all central office. Why is central office choosing the teacher members on the team?
I need you to refer, can you speak to the page or what structure you're under?
It's under accountability. Let's see. The composition of the team members will be chosen by the team. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? I'm looking.
So, Mr. Lamar, I see accountability team leads in reference to Imagine 2025. And where I read it, it says the composition of the team members will be chosen by the team leader. The team leader would be, so each component of Imagine 2025 falls within a division of the central office. And those division leaders have to bring in the people that can collect the data to determine the impact that we're having on each component of the district strategic plan. It doesn't mean that we're not going to survey and we're not going to collect information from a variety of stakeholders, but somebody has to take the lead to coordinate the monitoring of the impact in that plan. And if you read a little bit further, it does say the composition of the team members will be chosen by the team leader. Selection of representatives will be determined by the bargaining unit president. And maybe that's not where you're talking about. I'm sorry.
I do have one more thing.
Okay, wait.
Sorry.
Let me go to Ms. Burton first, and then I'll come back to you.
So on the first page, under organizational structure, the shared decision-making district team shall be comprised of. So for parents, it's suggesting here selected by a school-related parent organization. So who determines that? Do we determine that? Or is that it's just there every year, I know, for the last several years. So who makes that determination that parents come from, are selected by school-related parent organizations?
Part 100 regulations.
So that's a legal regulation.
That's, yeah, this is all structured by 100.1.
So I'd like more information about what those parent related organizations are, whether they're PTAs, PTOs, or whatever they're called, because I know they're not all called a PTA or PTO. And also, what is the demographics of those? Because, you know, when we're talking about diversity again, right? I know historically, when I was involved in parent-teacher organizations, they always weren't reflective of the student body, the demographics of our students and parents. So I think, and I know there was one superintendent at one time that was very active in trying to build the capacity of those groups, but I think we just need more information. I would like more information around who are those parent groups and who are they what's the representation of them. And then the other thing where it says community member recommended, who does those recommendations? Do they come from us? Who makes the recommendations for a community member that's part of the decision-making shared decision-making team?
We try to recruit that particular member. At this time, there's not a community member. We do have a higher education member on the district steering committee for shared decision-making.
So I think ultimately I'm trying to get to is who makes those decisions and how are folk aware of these opportunities, right? And we've talked about this in terms of if you don't know what's available, then you don't know that you could be a part of it. And so how do we have a equal footing in terms of getting information out in regards to even a community representative? I mean, who makes that decision? There's a lot of community people.
Yeah, so let me answer.
I call them traditional folk who sit around the table, get paid, work for organizations, and then we have, others that toil in the evening. We have NAACP who's been here regularly, for the last several meetings, And now we have a new parent group. Is that parent group considered one of our parent groups now? I don't know.
So, Ms. Burton, let me kind of unpack some of your questions.
Yeah.
So let me go back to the first one. When Dr. Freeman Mack starts on September 1st, if we approve her change, she will be the Assistant Superintendent for Equity and Access. She will oversee the Family and Community Engagement Division and working with Mrs. Peterson. So we can begin to collect that data to determine how diverse our parent organizations are in the schools and what are the recruitment strategies if we find out that they're not, and we can start to work on that. And I'll be sure to communicate that with Dr. Mack when she starts. Your second question was with regards to the community member. So shared decision-making is just making sure that when we put together teams of people to come together to make decisions, it's representative of all stakeholders. So the community member we will address a strategy that we'll put in place to offer the opportunity for community members to sit on those teams. And I'll make a note of that to make sure that that occurs. And I think that's it.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Mr. Lamar.
Okay. Under district advisories, it states that central office looks like central office is going to be in charge of creating the advisories that solicit feedback from teachers. I'm just wondering why that can't just be a regular ongoing dialogue, a regular meeting that gives that, ongoing feedback back and forth, as opposed to the district having the office downtown having a moment where they go, oh, we need to get some info. Let's see what's going on. It seems like more of a dialogue between the teachers and downtown would be beneficial.
So I apologize if that's the intent, but we do need to have someone that can convene and organize and welcome stakeholders from across the district. So the intention of this is if there's a need for an advisory, there needs to be a central office individual that's responsible for assembling members of the advisory. So, for example, if we want to create an advisory to take a look at a new playground equipment for elementary schools, what would that advisory look like? Well, then Mr. Velez would be responsible for getting a representative group of individuals to get together to start to research the purchase of new playground equipment. Okay. But this is just to say that somebody's got to take the lead to be able to create that opportunity for people to engage in a conversation.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. Just dovetailing on my colleague, Ms. Burton, and understanding the importance of when something does say a community member, I think that, I understand our intent. I understand that we do try to do that. But historically, it doesn't always happen that way. And sometimes it's just the same parent. It's the same person, it's the same individual. I think we need to make a more concerted effort and a deeper dive into including those marginalized population or those groups that are just underrepresented and don't get an opportunity to serve on some of these committees or serve on some of these different panels, because I constantly walk in the community and parents ask me, how can I get involved? How can I get involved? And I think they want to, but they don't know how to. So I think it's bigger and more important on our behalf to show them how to get involved, show them how to engage, because I know we have an incredible family community engagement team, and I know that we try to plug into the community, we try to dig into the community, we try to find those groups and those individuals, but I think a little more effort could be done on our behalf to ensure that the people that we know have not been engaged, have not been a part of this process, become a part of the process going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. We will definitely begin to come up with a strategy to improve that.
Board members, are there any other questions on this item? Yes, Mr. Lamar.
Will the teachers that are determined by the NTA and the CSEA members determined by their units be able to give feedback at board meetings?
I need more clarification than that.
At this point in time, teachers can't present, they can't come and speak at a board meeting. That's my understanding. I think the CSEA is under the same restrictions. And I feel like, maybe not the CSEA, no, teachers for sure. No?
I think that if a teacher wants to present on something that's important to them or important to their school, they can work with their principal. Their principal can then reach out to the central office and figure that out. I know that there have been some requests for SLTs to come and present their SEPs at a board meeting. We're just trying to get to the point where they can do that. So the plans have just been created. They've been written. And in the past, pre-COVID, the principal and some of the leadership team members have come to the board and presented the SEPs at the public meeting in the beginning of the year, and then presented middle of the year and end of the year to monitor their progress. We're not sure what that's going to look like this year. Dr. Manning Campbell just started, so once I have an opportunity to sit down with her to find out what model she wants to use, there will be opportunities for SLT teams to come and present. Individual teachers, again, I would recommend that they go to their principal, talk to their principal about something, and then reach out to the appropriate senior staff member to see if we can get it here.
Yes, Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. So I think one thing we should do, because I know we're being focused, we're being cambered. Hello, everyone. We need to stop using acronyms, because we have a lot of parents that listen to these programs, listen to our board meetings, SLT, this. They don't have an idea or a clue what SLT stands for. So a lot of parents, and a lot of the acronyms that we continuously use. I know we do it because we assume that everybody understands what those letters mean and what they represent. But trust and believe, the amount of parents that were watching us during COVID and the amount of people in the community that's continue to watch our board meetings, when we continue to use acronyms, they have no clue what we're talking about.
I agree, Mr. Howard. I agree wholeheartedly. Yes, Ms. Burton.
So when we have school orientations, from your experiences, and that's anyone.
Ms. Burton, that we're on the, we're talking about something else. We're not
Still on shared decision-making?
Yeah, we're on shared
Okay,
decision.
that's what my question is in response
go ahead.
to. So when schools have orientations or, the days when parents come in, from anyone's experience who's worked here at the school district, have we provided parents consistently, the hierarchy of the district, the hierarchy of decision-making within this institution? Because if you don't know it, you just don't know it. I mean, there's layers that's taken me 4 years to figure out, and that's still haven't figured it out because there's so many layers to it. But on a school level, that should be a constant discussion or even information sent to parents so they understand what those decision-making processes are within their school.
So yes, there are opportunities for us to have those conversations. They need to be had a lot more frequently. The district, I worked specifically with Cassie Sklarz and with Dr. Sklarz and Mr. Schindler a few years ago to create a communication manual for the district, along with Dr. Padilla. That communication manual is still active. It needs to be brought back out and reviewed. Who do you go to get the answer for this question? That's the way it was written. So we will definitely get that out, publicize it, and start to really support the use of it, because it does. It helps people to know, where do I go? And, what are the variety of people that I can go to get those responses? We'll bring that back out and share it in the very near future.
Yes, Ms. Burton.
So I would also suggest, just like we look at learning styles for young people and students, that we consider learning styles for parents as well. Everyone does not read a manual. I prefer, like, if you're going to give me a hierarchy, I want to literally see the boxes so that I can make sense of it, as opposed to reading or in combination of. So something actually visual as well, so they can see, here's what this is, and why it's important, and how you can get involved. So
I misspoke. The manual is for the staff to use. It is in organizational chart form. It is in graphics. It is in, here's who you go to for what. All of that is laid out. I was referring to, we have a communication manual that we use to begin to do that. Ms. Peterson?
Yes, Ms. Peterson.
I think that's why in the district comprehensive improvement plan, some of the things that we're talking about in terms of family community engagement, communication, in terms of how we're engaging parents and our school community in changes, is in alignment with what a lot of what you guys are saying tonight. We have to improve in communication. We have to make sure that we're reaching out. And it's going to be one of the goals for the new assistant superintendent in the reconstruction phase of how are we communicating with our parents? How are we providing resources? What are the directives that we're giving our building level leaders? What is going to be required at those events where parents are present? And then how are we engaging with the community stakeholders? We started that process this year, and making sure that we were connecting with municipalities, making sure that we were talking to people that were at the Boys and Girls Club and youth engagement, to try to get them around the table so that we can really start getting those stakeholder groups and their input in our programming.
Board members, any other questions? Ms. Green?
For the parents that are watching, to the best of my knowledge, SLT is school leadership team, because it wasn't said. So I just wanted to make sure, according to what Mr. Howard said, that they understand that SLT stands for school leadership team.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Green, because everybody needs that. Yes, Mr. Lamar.
As relates to school leadership teams, I'm curious about NFA. How many meetings did the school leadership team at NFA have, and who were the parents on there, and how were they chosen? Because I never heard anything about it, and I've got a kid there.
So I would have to research that, and I would have to give you that information after I do that research. I can speak to you with the schools that are in the accountability system. That's tracked very, very specifically. Schools that are in good standing, I would have to collect that information to get back to you. I do know that there are conversations in place right now to create the new school leadership team that will have parent involvement on that particular team.
One thing that I also want to add, I know that a lot of parents that engaged in the behavioral forum last year, that was one of the things that we committed to last year, was ensuring that those parents would be participating in contact in the fall to make sure that we are creating programming. So there were parents that reached out to us and agreed also to be a part of that mix of making sure that there is improvement around the main campus. So I just also want to say that as well.
Any other questions on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Lamar? No. Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker? Yes. Ms. Burton?
yes.
Mr. DeRay? Yes. Ms. Green? Yes. And Mr. Howard?
Yes.
That concludes my items, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Mrs. Moriarty.
Thank you, Madam President. The Division of Curriculum Instruction presents items 4.1 through 4.12 as a consent agenda.
Would any member like to separate out any items? Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker? Yes. Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay? Yes. Ms. Green? Yes. Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mrs. Moriarty. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Exceptional Learners, Mr. Bayer.
Thank you, Madam President. Exceptional Learners has one item, the recommendations from the CSC and CPSC committees for the board's consideration.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Questions or discussion? You know, I'm so used to looking back and forth when you were on both sides. I'm so sorry. Roll call, Mr. Clerk, on this item.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes?
Mr. Walker? Ms. Burton? Mr. Duray? Ms. Green? Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar? Mr. Levinstein?
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. Bayer. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Ms. Roaring.
Thank you, Madam President. The Division of Finance presents items 6.1 to 6.8 for consent this evening.
I'd like to, first, would any member like to separate out any of these items? Yes, Ms. Burton.
6.2.
6.2. Anybody else? I'd like to entertain a motion on 6.1 through 6.7, taking out 6.2.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on the big group of items?
Madam President,
Yes?
you didn't say 6.8.
I didn't say 6.8. I'm sorry.
I have 6.1 through 6.8 on consent, minus 6.2.
I'm sorry. So do I have to redo that?
No, ma'am.
Okay, sorry. All right, so we're going to go, nobody has any questions on the bulk of those items. Roll call, Mr. Clerk. Thank you, Mr. Howard.
Thank you all.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes?
Mr. Walker? No. Ms. Burton? We're voting on 6.1 through 6.8 minus 6.2. Mr. Duray? Ms. Green? Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar? Mr. Levinstein?
Let's go back to item, yes?
I misunderstood.
It's okay. Thank you, sir. Can we do that? Yes, thank you. We're going to move on to item 6.2. I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Questions or discussion on this item? Ms. Burton.
So this is an extension of the contract we already have for 22-23, and it doesn't have an amount.
Yeah, ma'am, it is to add South Middle School to the schools.
So it's just open-ended at this point in terms of how much we're paying for sheriffs to be in our schools.
So, Ms. Burton, your question is it needs an amount?
And it also says July 1st, 2020, dated March 16, 2021. So this is through April 2022. I don't even see what the dates are. It seems like it's pretty open-ended.
Mr. Forget.
Madam President and Mrs. Burton, yes, this resolution needs to be amended. The effective date should be July 1st, 2022 through August 31st, 2023.
So I need a motion to amend. I need a motion to amend the motion that's on the floor.
Second.
All right, roll call to amend.
Mr. Walker? Yes. Ms. Burton?
Just to amend.
Mr. Duray? Yes. Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Mineo?
Yes. So now we have an amended resolution on the floor. What other questions and discussion do you have, Ms. Burton?
We don't have an amount. We don't know what this is costing us.
It wasn't in the original. I would have to get back to you with the amount. It was not in the original contract and agreement. I'll look up the last year.
Are there any other questions, board members? Mr. Lamar, do you have a question? You look like you have a question. No? Okay. Yes, Ms. Green.
Can we have another motion to table this until we have the information? Because it's hard to vote on something that you don't have all the information for. So can we table it?
You can make a motion to table. It needs a second.
Okay.
And we can vote on that. So you're making that motion. Can I have a second? Roll call to table.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay? Yes. Ms. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar? Yes. Mr. Levinstein? No. Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
So that item is tabled.
Thank you, Madam President. That concludes my items this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Roaring. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 7.1 through 7.14 for your consideration on tonight.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Yes, ma'am?
I don't want to separate. He said 7.14, but it's up to 7.17.
Right.
Wait, say that again, please.
No, he said it was 7.1 to 7.14. It's up to 7.17, so.
Sorry. Thank you, Ms. Green. So it's 7.1 through 7.17. Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
Oh.
Can I have a motion?
Oh.
Thank you. Questions or discussion on these items? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. DeRay? Yes. Ms. Green? Yes. Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar? Yes. Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Mineo?
Yes?
Mr. Walker? Yes. Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Ms. Green. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. McLemore. And I'd like to tell everybody, Mr. Spellman is in the audience. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Spellman. Do a great job for us. We're going to move on to our Clerk of the Board, Mr. McCoy.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the approval of the minutes from the August 9th board meeting.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved. Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Green? Yes. Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar? Yes. Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker? Yes. Ms. Burton? Yes. Mr. DeRay?
I'd like to, oops, sorry.
Tonight, we passed the tax warrant, which has to be signed by all 9 board members. So before all the board members leave after we adjourn, just come over to my desk. We need to get you to sign the tax warrant. That concludes my items, Madam President.
Thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar? Yes. Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker? Yes. Ms. Burton? Mr. DeRay? Yes. Ms. Green?
So we won't see you again until September after school has started. So have a safe and healthy beginning of school year. I'll be thinking about all of you. Good night.